Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to a bumper edition of Champions League Takeaway, following on from the final match day of the Champions League. 18 games at once. They're calling it midweek mayhem. They're calling it Wild Wednesday. We've got the breakdown of all of it here on Ranks FC. My name's Jack Collins, and I will be your host today. And joining me across the water, it's the one and only Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, that was good fun. That was enjoyable.
That was a lot, is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I didn't need to get as overwhelmed as you because I know that you do the heavy lift. That's probably how I feel on transfer deadline eve or transfer deadline day is how you probably just felt on whatever you call this day. Yeah, midweek mayhem. Madness, mate. Let's go. Let's get stuck into it. Let's rattle through it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really quite a lot. 18 games. I've put about 2,000 words down in notes over the last 2 hours, Dean. There was steam off the keyboard at times. This is my Everest in many ways, this 18 gamers. So I have enjoyed myself, but it's been a bit chaotic. And I think maybe what we should do to start with is just read out the table, and then we'll get into some of these games. So the top 8. There's 8 teams who skip this playoff round and go straight into the last 16. Arsenal, top of the league, 8 from 8, 24 points. No draws, no losses, 8 wins. Very, very impressive from Arsenal. Bayern in second, Liverpool in third, Tottenham in fourth, Barcelona in fifth, Chelsea in sixth, Sporting in seventh. What a story that is. And Man City in eighth. Which means you'll notice that Real Madrid occupy the first playoff spot down in ninth after one of the wildest evenings we've seen in a long, long time at the Estadio de Luz, coming up against former boss Jose Mourinho. We're going to start there, but they're joined in the playoffs by Inter, PSG, Newcastle, Juve, Atletico Madrid, Atalanta, and Leverkusen, who'll be the seeded team, so all of them will play at home second. And then the unseeded teams are Borussia Dortmund, Olympiacos, Club Brugge, Galatasaray, Monaco, Karabag, Bordeaux, Glimt, hell of a story there as well, and Benfica. We'll get to them. It means the teams that are going home, who are out of the competition, are Olympique Marseille, Paphos, Union Saint-Gilloise, PSV Eindhoven, Athletic Club, Napoli, Copenhagen, Ajax, Eintracht Frankfurt, Slavia Prague, Villarreal, and Kairat Almaty, who finish bottom of the table. But some big names and some big guns leaving the competition at this stage. We'll get through all of it on the course of this podcast. But Dean, I think we can only start at the Estadio de Luz. It was billed as something special. Jose Mourinho coming up against Alvaro Arbeloa, coming up against a player who idolized him as a manager, who has already spoken so many times about his affection for Jose Mourinho and for what he did at the club. He spent a long time saying, you know, it was all built, all the Champions Leagues that were won under Zidane, etc. It was all built under Jose Mourinho. He came up against his mentor today and was given a little bit of a lesson in how to masterclass a victory, Jose Mourinho, against his former side. This was really quite something.
It's a terrible outcome, but losing 4-2 and in the manner of it is unbelievable. But I'm just absolutely stunned at the 2 red cards that Real Madrid have got in the late stages. Like, obviously, all the story is going to be that the goalkeeper has scored a diving header in added time. Like, that is
as it should be, you know.
That is, and like I was watching with Dylan and Reese. They get home early on a Wednesday, and they got home and were watching it with me. And we were trying to explain, like, on the commentary here, they kept saying, it doesn't seem like Benfica know that they still need a goal. And then obviously, like, the ball's about to come in, the goalkeeper's lining up. Like, Reese's dream in his life is to see a goalkeeper score a goal. He's seen it on YouTube and never anywhere else. And I'm like, Reese, look, he's up. And we just lost our minds as it actually went in. But it cannot get lost in all this that Asensio and Rodrigo have got red cards in the 5 minutes building up to it. Asensio's is ridiculous, like a stupid second yellow. Rodrigo's equally as stupid, and he's still
Yeah, I mean,
arguing.
at least Asensio's one is for a tackle.
Yeah, I get, but is it a tackle? I don't know what it is. It's not even. I don't know. But yeah, I guess. What did Rodrigo do? Just shout at the ref? Like, is that literally what it was?
I assume it's a back chat,
so.
right? Like,
And
because
he's
it was
still
all
shouting
lost
as
in
he
this
goes down
weird
the tunnel.
chaos because Kylian Mbappe had sort of kicked the ball out of the goalkeeper's hand and tucked it in. And then there was this massive slanging match. And the next thing you know, Rodrigo's been sent off, having been only introduced as a substitute. Before we get into the ins and outs of it, should we just work you through what I wrote down during this game? Because it was one that I was like, okay, we're going to have this on a screen. I've had about 5 screens live tonight, right? So there was a couple of games that I was like, I think this is going to be pretty special. Obviously, you were covering some of them in a bit more depth and others in less, but I was like, there are about 5 games that I'm really interested in. This is one of them. One of them was the Athletic Sporting game, which I'm going to get onto later on, which I thought was going to be excellent and very much delivered. But this was the one that sort of drew the attention almost from the start. And there are a couple of big decisions that Jose Mourinho made. He started Thomas Araujo instead of Antonio Silva at centre-back, and I thought it was clever to put Barreiro back in place of Barrenechea in midfield. And it was as you were for Real Madrid after that very comfortable victory over Villarreal at the weekend. Tchouaméni in place of Camavinga in midfield, which is very like for like. The first kind of 20 minutes of this was all Benfica. They really, really dominated the opening of this game. They got the first big chance, and it was Prestiani who'd been brilliant down that left-hand side, right? And he was played in, curled one, Courtois touched it onto the bar. He'd been giving Valverde palpitations down that side, right? Like, he was really, really impressive in the first part of the game. And naturally, obviously, the fact that Benfica had dominated those first 20 minutes meant that after half an hour, Real Madrid took the lead. You don't really need to ask who it was these days. It was a slightly different goal, a really, really nice goal, actually. Beautiful deep cross from Mastantuono at the back stick. And Mbappe had made a late run, at the back post, ghosting in to head the ball home, sort of through Trubin as much as past him, put his team ahead. And it would have been very easy for Benfica to crumble at that point. But in their defence, and fair play to them, they fought their way back in. They got a deserved equaliser. Pavlidis went charging down the right-hand side, and Asensio slips. Now, one of the things that you probably should know if you haven't watched this game is that the conditions were absolutely biblical. It was almost perfect Jose Mourinho weather. It was pouring in Lisbon, and the game kind of lived up to that in the chaos that kind of ensued. And actually, it was a brilliant cross from Pavlidis, because he picks up this perfect cross for Skelderup to head home. And just before the break, there was a fair bit of drama, as you might imagine. Benfica got a penalty. Otamendi went down in the box very, very easily. Like, this was incredibly soft. The referee pointed to the spot. There was contact. And so I suppose if, VAR was checking or whatever, they would have been like, yeah, you've made that call on the pitch. We're going to stick with it. We see that a bit more in the Champions League, I think. But it was incredibly, incredibly soft. Look, Benfica were the better team in the first half, and they deserved to go in the lead, which they did, because Pavlidis thumps this penalty down the middle past Courtois. But I don't think it's a penalty, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And I think that, Real Madrid will fume about this decision, as they do, but I think they genuinely have a right to do so in this one. But Benfica picked up the second half as they'd left off the first. They added a third, their lovely flowing move from right to left. Skelderup again, who ends up coming onto the ball in the penalty area. He strokes it home beautifully. And that seemed to wake up what had been really up to that point like a stuporous Madrid. And Rodrigo was introduced at that point. He helped to set up the second. Really nice interplay between him and Arda Güler on the right-hand side of the box. Güler pulls it back and Mbappe strokes it home. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, how does this play out? Like, we know how good Real Madrid are in the Champions League. They're coming up against Jose Mourinho. He knows that effectively Benfica at that moment had to score again or wait for other results to kind of change in their favour in order for them to get into these playoff places. But I thought that he managed this beautifully, because actually what they did was they sat off and they allowed Real Madrid to frustrate themselves, throwing themselves at a bit of a wall for a while. And then obviously it goes a bit mad to the end, pinball in the rain, opportunities at both ends. Although, to be honest, Benfica started to play on the counter, and they then really started to find those moments. Then Asensio gets sent off for that second yellow card. Then Rodrigo manages to get himself sent off for a second yellow for back chat. And then at that moment, Mourinho is on the touchline screaming at his players that they need another goal. They get this free kick in the last seconds of the game, swung in by Frederick Arsnes, and Anatoly Trubin, who's forced himself gets on the end of it, heads it in, and sends the luge absolutely ballistic. The scenes in this stadium were biblical. It was unbelievable. So Benfica jumped Marseille into 24th. Real Madrid end up 9th outside of those automatic spots. And now they could meet again in the playoff round. I got to say with Mourinho, there is this one thing. I know he loves Arbeloa, right? And we know that Arbeloa loves him. But he loves to assert a little bit of like old alpha dominance over people who were once like kind of his apprentices, right? Like he absolutely loves that situation. And my God, he won the mind games tonight.
Yeah, and good, to be honest. Like sometimes I do still like to see the master have the power. And I like to be reminded that Mourinho's got some magic about him, and it's certainly shone through here. It was an unbelievable finish to a football match. Like, obviously, like, there are going to be frustrations from Real Madrid's point of view. Honestly, on the Mbappe disallowed goal, like, I'm sure a lot of you will see this if you haven't. That goalkeeper is about to kick the ball, and Mbappe kind of takes it away
this
from
isn't
him.
allowed. You can't do this.
I mean, why? I think why, honestly. Why is this not allowed in football? Like, the goalkeeper's that stupid to kick it when he's that close to him.
You have to be a certain distance away from the goalkeeper, can't you?
It's more about isn't it more about if he's in control of the ball? And it's like, I just don't understand why. There's no other rule within football apart from a set piece the way you can't be standing next to someone while they've got a ball.
No, but like in terms of the actual like rules, this isn't a goal, right? Like, and I don't like if you have problems with the rules, that's one thing. This never stands. There's no way on earth this ever stands. If the ball's out in front of the goalkeeper on the deck, sure, but if they're kicking it from their hands, you can't nick it between the point where they.
I'm telling you, I don't agree with the rule. I'm saying if the goalkeeper throws the ball in the air and the striker is sharp enough to nick that off him and get past him, I think that should be a goal.
Okay, all right, that's fine. But like, look. Madrid are going to have complaints about certain elements of the refereeing tonight, right? Like they're going to have some legitimate complaints about some of it. The penalty, the award, they'll have issues, I'm sure, with the Rodrigo second yellow and the red card. And look, I think the first one of those they can have a legitimate grievance with. I don't think they can have a legitimate grievance with Kylian Mbappe kicking the ball out of the keeper's hands.
He didn't kick it out of his hand. He wasn't holding it.
No, but like that's like I'm not giving them more fuel for the fire. That doesn't count.
They'll argue it, I promise.
I'm sure they will. But look, I mean, at the weekend we saw Real Madrid dispatch a relatively poor Villarreal, right? Who have been good all season, but haven't been good against the teams above them. And Real Madrid did what they needed to do in that game against Villarreal. They kept them at bay, they held them at arm's length, and they ultimately end up winning the game through, a moment of real quality from Mbappe and then a penalty right at the end. Fine. But there's been this kind of feeling of turnaround in terms of where Real Madrid have been and a kind of feeling of renewal and the energy that they've put into games. And tonight, we saw almost none of that. This was a Benfica team who ultimately wanted it more, who outplayed Real Madrid from pretty much 0 to 90. And whilst they can have complaints about some of the refereeing decisions, fine, I'm happy to admit that, the better team won tonight. It could have been 6-2. And I don't think that Real Madrid could have had any real grievances with that result in terms of the way that the game played out. So for me, there then becomes a question of being like, okay, you've moved away. You thought you were getting this kind of new start, and suddenly there's a major, major setback immediately. Where does that leave them?
Leave them in big trouble. I mean, Arbeloa's been in charge of 2 big cup games, and they've lost both of them. So that's showing that you haven't really progressed from where you were. Like, was Xabi Alonso from the last 5 games have been any worse off than this? No. So that's the issue that they've got themselves in right now. Like 2 trophies up for grabs. One of them they're definitely out of, and this one, who knows at this point. So yeah, very strange situation to find themselves in. It was obviously like 5-star entertainment, but for once, a competition that is Real Madrid's, the tide has turned. The tide has turned, and they've lost the magic.
Yeah, a little bit, it seems, at the moment. Now, they'll play either Benfica or Bodo Glimt in the playoff round, which would be very interesting because I don't think anyone's going to really want to go to the plastic pitch in the Arctic Circle. I mean, the second leg's at the Bernabeu, so you assume that they will get through, given the fact that, that's been a relative fortress in Champions League terms for so many different years. But they either come up against Mourinho again, playing all of these mind games. And imagine if that is the case, he's not going to be like, oh, they had 2 men sent off. They, all these things are going to come into play, right? They can't handle it. They're not mentally there. It's going to be very interesting to see how it goes from here. So, yeah, Real Madrid out of the automatic spots and Benfica squeezing into that final playoff spot. Ultimate drama served up by the midweek Champions League chaos. There's lots to get through, so we're going to rattle through these as quickly as possible. This is still going to be a long podcast, but let's go to PSG Newcastle, because I'd written in my notes before this one, Dean, that the winner qualifies for the top 8. Draw puts both in trouble. PSG won. Newcastle won. And there were some interesting bits before the game. PSG started Safanov in goal instead of Chevalier, and Fabian Ruiz wasn't available. There was reports in the French press that he was going to be back for this game, but no dice, wasn't even on the bench. And Newcastle started with a back 5 and left Anthony Gordon out of the starting 11 to put Elanga in. Lewis Miley at right wing back was interesting, shall we say, to start this game. But it turned into a very interesting game of football and 2 very different halves, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, PSG should be kicking themselves because they should have won the game. It shouldn't have really been a competition. And for the first half hour, it wasn't a competition. PSG could have gone in front in the first minute. They get a handball decision, go their way.
Very harsh, by the way.
Very harsh.
It looks like, I don't mind it being a handball, but it looks like it bounces off Barcola's arm before it hits mine.
Before it does, yeah. 100. I wouldn't have given it personally, but as you know, I don't go by the rules. It turns out that didn't matter anyway, because Dembele, poor pen, decent save from Pope. Score stays the same, but then Vitinha scores a great goal. Sends Hall for a hot dog as he pretends to shoot it. Hall's on the floor. Vitinha bends one into the bottom corner. One of the best goals you'll see all night. Worry for PSG when Kvaratskhelia goes off injured. They've obviously got Doué to come on, so it's not the end of the world. But at that point,
had basically made that first goal, though, with a massive burst down the right-hand side.
Yeah, I mean, at this point of the game, like, Newcastle were completely overwhelmed. They massively missed Bruno Guimaraes in the middle. Tonali was getting overwhelmed. He was kind of stuck on his own. He was in the midfield with Jacob Murphy. Lewis Hall had been kind of tucking inside as well. Hall looked lost, to be honest, in the first half. Hall wasn't good enough. Elanga wasn't good enough. Willock hadn't been good enough. Miley hadn't been good enough. Voltemada hadn't been doing enough. Like, I was just the middle of the pitch, like in front of the centre backs, all the way up to the forwards. There was just all sorts of holes. And the PSG players, whether it was Vitinha or Dembele, Jean Neves, whoever, were just taking it in turns to drift in there, and they were having a lot of joy with it. And it really was a case of that PSG just getting that second goal. Newcastle were just not in the game. It was looking like a poor performance, to be honest with you. And then right on half time, a goal out of nowhere. They get this free kick, which is like basically on the halfway line, and Newcastle have this setup whereby they send everyone forward towards the edge of the box. They line everybody up. And they did this multiple times throughout the game in the second half as well. It's almost like a rugby player or a different sport. Like, everybody just goes running forwards, and it's like we're gonna boot it up there, and we're gonna win back possession or whatever, and we're gonna play for the knock. They play for the knockdown, and ultimately PSG didn't clear it. Dan Burn keeps the ball alive, and Joe Willock does really well to pounce and steer it in.
Great movement in the box, actually, from him to kind of read this one, because Byrne does well to knock it back across, but it's Willock's movement that ends up,
he's just
basically
timed
making
it really
the goal.
well. It's one of the things he's very good at. Now, it just changes the game. Newcastle come out more composed and more compact, and PSG haven't got the same spaces to play into. They lack the zip. They're becoming a bit frustrated because the same holes don't exist. And Newcastle, a lot of the time, just had 8 players behind the ball straight away, and it just closed up everything. Dembele, when he got chances, was missing them. It was not his night at all. And then, to be honest, Newcastle could have nicked it. When Anthony Gordon did come on, changed the game. And Harvey Barnes has missed an absolute sitter by his standards. The ball was spinning. It wasn't as easy as it looks. But he would have fancied himself to score it. So the result ultimately doesn't help anyone, particularly the 1-1. But Newcastle can be very proud of themselves. And it just goes to show in football matches that you've got to keep believing, because genuinely, if I was a Newcastle fan after half hour of that game, I'd have been tempted to just leave it, because I'd have been like, there's nothing to see here. There's no way we're getting out of here alive. And then, that moment on the set piece, the goal turns it around just before half time, and then it becomes a different game. So, Eddie Howe, obviously been under a lot of pressure recently, still will be under pressure to some in some respects, but that was a good result for Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's 2 ways of looking at this. One, Anthony Gordon coming on potentially could have won the game for Newcastle late on. And maybe that was the plan, right? To go to the 5 at the back, to try and hang in there. It felt weird kind of squeezing Lewis Miley into that right wing back position. And he was immediately undone, for the penalty. I think he's unlucky in terms of the handball, but the whole thing comes from getting in behind him immediately. And I do wonder if there's an element of this where if you watch Sporting's game plan against PSG last week, right, and admittedly at that point PSG were away, but they still want to dominate the ball. They still want to play the same kind of way. You look at what Sporting did, and they basically just tried to attack those channels in behind, hold tight for 30 minutes or so. And I did find it weird that Anthony Gordon wasn't utilised from the start, because almost to play with no striker and have 2 players running in behind felt like the way you were going to potentially open up PSG. And that's what transpired in the second half. Equally, if they don't concede the early goal, then maybe they look at this and say, well, we were able to actually change the game and swing it in our favour second half, and we could have nicked it if Harvey Barnes had slotted that chance in. So I don't know if you look at it and go, did Eddie Howe get it slightly wrong, or did he get it absolutely right? And the changes he made could have ended up winning them the game. It's a bit 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in some ways.
I think he got it wrong in the sense that Tonali was so exposed centrally in the first half, and he should have he probably did seek to fix that sooner than it actually turned out. But ultimately, this is what's going to happen when Bruno Guimaraes isn't in this team. Bruno Guimaraes, a lot of the time, is Newcastle United, and Tonali needs him. And they've survived the night without him, so that's a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to Naples. Napoli 2, Chelsea 3, a very, very dramatic encounter in Naples. And it was interesting to see the lineups for this one. 3-4-3 for Napoli. They haven't really got any other options at the moment. Lukaku was on the bench. They only had 5 outfield footballers on the bench, and a couple of them were kids and a couple of them were Crocs. That really, really does show
like
you
crocodiles or like injured.
No, injured, mate. No, there was no crocodiles.
I wasn't sure how desperate they were.
Yeah, well, they got Marcelo Brozovic back, Il Crocodilo, to kind of try and find that. But no, it was really quite grim from a depth perspective. Rosenia started Reece James as a centre back, which felt a bit random in some ways. Estevao on the right, João Pedro up top. Chelsea weren't particularly brilliant to begin with. They kept the ball a lot, but they didn't feel particularly like they were going to find a breakthrough. But from a Reece James free kick, they got a penalty for handball in the ward, and Enzo Fernandez with a brilliant penalty, low to the keeper's right. He guessed right, but absolutely no save in that, and Chelsea take the lead. But kind of out of nowhere, Napoli found themselves an equaliser through a very unlikely source. But Dean, I love this, and I have to give it its props. This is as poetic as you will ever see a goal, because the Neapolitan born and bred youngster, Antonio Vergara, who was on loan in the 3rd tier last year, only dropped into this squad because of the injuries that they are currently having, at the Maradona, drops the Maradona turn, socks down, and then squeezes it past Robert Sanchez. Absolutely unbelievable for his first ever Napoli goal. Like, you can't really get better than that in terms of a storyline. And the place obviously goes absolutely ballistic. And it seemingly inspired Napoli, right? Because they take the lead just before half-time. Oliveira's cross smashed home off the post. A steaming run from Rasmus Højlund gets ahead of Wesley Fofana, leaves Sanchez absolutely no chance. And at that moment, you're thinking, wow, okay, this depleted Napoli squad, are they going to find a result here to drag themselves into the playoffs? At the moment, they kind of felt lowest after that hammering at the hands of Juventus at the weekend. But Chelsea recovered really well after the break. I thought the introduction of Cole Palmer at halftime felt important. He teed up João Pedro, who rifles one into the top corner. Gorgeous strike from João Pedro. Keeper absolutely no chance. And 2-2 did nobody any favours. So both teams kind of went from it from that moment. It opened up for Chelsea to take the lead end to end. And again, Palmer feeds it through for João Pedro after good strength in midfield. He had plenty to do still. Raced into the area, fired across the keeper, put Chelsea back in those automatic places. And that combination between Cole Palmer and João Pedro feels very important for Chelsea and Rosenia going forward. And look, I think that you can look at this again 2 ways. I think Rosenia made a couple of mistakes in terms of his team selection to begin with, but he made good substitutions, in the second half. He made a real difference this game, changed it in Chelsea's favour, and that's 2 good wins in a row in different ways. They were really in control against Palace at the weekend. They've come from behind here, and that feels like a big moment for Liam Rosenia. They finished in 6th, and Napoli completely eliminated from the Champions League. So a big result for Chelsea, and a really, really good night for João Pedro, I thought.
A brilliant night for João Pedro, who is showing he is a number 9. People wonder about...
As long as Palmer's on the pitch, he's great.
Yeah, obviously it is important. And obviously, like Palmer, he's pretty much supposed to be the star of the team. So, like, if you haven't got him there, you're always going to be missing some spark. But João Pedro is obviously also in the frame here, trying to win his place as Brazil's number 9 for the summer, and that's a very, very important thing to him. But first and foremost, he has to prove that he's Chelsea's number 9, and he's definitely doing that. Like, he wants to be this. People question whether he's a 10, whether he should be just off the striker. But like, this guy's idol is Lewandowski in terms of the way he watches football, and if he wants to become more of that player, then he's showing the right way about it. And I think Rafinha's football is suited him more than Maresca's football, because one thing we are seeing in Rafinha's Chelsea is an explosive side to their attacking play. And they might have some slower build-up play at times. They look to go through the middle a lot, but they do turn over play quickly, and they'll look to release him. And, both of his goals were exceptional. They were exceptional goals from João Pedro. And yeah, very, very impressed with his growth already under Rafinha, and credit to the Chelsea boss as well, because he does deserve the plaudits for the way that they managed to turn this game around. And while obviously the memes have been going around, he's kept his focus. He's not really listening to the outside noise. He believes in himself a lot, and that's really important. And this is one of those games where he can kind of stick his middle finger up at a few of the people that question him.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that whilst it hasn't all been particularly pretty, that's 6 wins from 7 for Rosenia now as Chelsea boss. And, that's something that I think they would have taken before he stepped in. And he said in the interview afterwards, I was watching, just to see what he said. And he basically was like, look, I'm learning about this team. I'm learning about what makes it tick. I'm trying to understand all the composite parts and how to put them together in the way that makes us win football matches. And it's true, right? You don't walk in and everything is perfect straight away. And look, we're seeing that with lots of different people, Alvaro Arbeloa being another, right? And, they do need time. This isn't me saying that, suddenly one of these is better than another or all of these things, but these were 3, if you include Michael Carrick at United, bosses that were kind of thrown in under different levels of pressure, but who are all trying to work their teams out from what came before. I think that of all of them, Rosenia feels like he's, looking at it and kind of taking it in a direction that feels maybe his own more than everyone else's. And that, so far, for the most part, so good in terms of what he's doing. Yep. So, yeah, shout out to Lim Rosenia and what he's doing at Chelsea. Finally, before we take a little break, I wanted to just go to Athletic Club 2, Sporting 3. This was a corker in so many ways. And I wasn't really sure how it was going to play out, because Athletic have been going through a pretty dreary streak, bar their win in Bergamo last week, which gave them a little bit of hope from a Champions League perspective. And Sporting have been flying in the Champions League, but mostly at home. A Sporting win could have meant the automatics. Athletic lost, and they were done and dusted in terms of qualification. So Gurutheta came back in for Athletic. Both the Williamses and Danny Vivian miss out. So they're very, very light in terms of senior leaders in this team. And it was an interesting formation, a really attacking 4-2-3-1 from Sporting. Braganza came in at 10. They left Pedro Gonçalves on the bench to begin with, which I thought was intriguing. Trincao on the left, Katamo on the right. And it was a brilliant start from Athletic. Sam Amez was absolutely roaring, as you might expect. And Athletic took a really nice early lead. A bit of pinball in the box, but it fell to the man you wanted it to if you were an Athletic fan. Oyhan Sanset tucking it nicely into the far corner. But Sporting didn't really let that faze them. Great response to force a couple of corners. And from one of them, Diamande leapt highest to head home, restore parity, and kind of off we went again. And yet, despite the fact that Sporting felt like they were kind of starting to control the game, it was Athletic that took the lead again. An uncharacteristic error from the Sporting defence laid up Gurutheta, and he's loved this competition, even if Athletic haven't. He made the most of it. Whilst his first strike was stopped by the keeper, he smashed home the rebound past Rui Silva into the roof of the net. And it stayed like that until sort of midway through the second half. Sporting kind of going up the gears as they went. They found the equaliser about 25 minutes to go. Some really nice interplay to allow Trincao to slip in behind and slot home. And Sporting kept their foot on the pedal. Jenny Katamo had a great strike that was palm wide for a corner. And it was almost like in the last 10 minutes, both sides realised that a draw was absolutely no good. So Athletic got a corner with about 5 minutes to play, and they threw everybody bar like the keeper and one defender up for this corner. I was like, feels a bit early for that. Anyway, it was caught by Rui Silva, who released Luis Suarez, and he raced clear in behind, denied by Unai Simon in the Athletic goal, and everyone is sort of scrambling back. The ball falls to Alisson Santos on the edge, and he fires home a daisy cutter. The Sporting bench empties, like absolutely empties. Everyone goes screaming down the touchline. They jump back into the top 8 and the automatic spots, and a really important late goal from them. What a game of football it was, and exceptionally entertaining from pretty much start to finish. This was the one that I kind of earmarked at the start of the day. I was like, this is a game that I think is going to be really, really intriguing. And look, what a result for Sporting. They finished in 7th in the Champions League places. They're ahead of Manchester City, Real Madrid, Inter, PSG. That is some going. Nobody is going to want to go to the other lads, where they've won 4 from 4 in this league stage. They look like they have the ability to play in a number of different ways. It's a really good structure. They've bounced back really well with Højbjerg at the helm after Amorim departed midway through last season, and their season kind of fell apart for a bit. And I just think that they deserve immense credit, because you look at the names in that top 8, and then you look at Sporting in there and you're a bit like, wow, okay, that's some going in this Champions League. On the other side, Athletic's dreary run of form goes on, eliminated in those last 8 spots. So it's turning into a pretty bleak season from an Athletic perspective, but Sporting are absolutely flying, Dean.
Yeah, and that was great scenes. Like you say, I was only flicked over just at that moment, actually, as the scenes went wild down the side, and it was, that's what it's all about. It was good fun.
Great night for Portuguese football.
I guess.
Great night for Portuguese football. Benfica sneaking in, Sporting in the top 8. Yeah. Porto have the opportunity potentially to go into the top 8 in the Europa League tomorrow as well. So lots to play for, but it's been a good season for the Primeira sides, I think, kind of across the bat. So credit to them, a major, major credit to Sporting, who have been excellent throughout this campaign. Right, we're going to take a break there. When we come back, we're going to look at the other sides who've made it into the top 8. And then in part 3, we'll look through everything else that happened as well. Make sure you stick with us here on Champions League Takeaway on Ranks FC. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Jack Collins and Dean Jones alongside you. Let's look at the rest of the teams that round out that top 8, Dean. And let's go quickly to Spurs, because it has been a very strange season. They won 2-0 at Eintracht Frankfurt. Interesting game. And Spurs bringing Pape Matar into the midfield alongside Archie Gray and Joao Palhinha. Kolo Muani started through the middle, and Kevin Danso coming in for Mickey van der Ven, who's picked up a knock. Odegaard kept his spot on the right wing, which felt important, and Xavi Simons drifted off that left-hand flank with a doggy rampaging up and down there. Spurs had an early goal ruled out, and it was a lot to do with Pape Matar driving, running on his return through the heart of midfield. And it was him again marauding from midfield who came closest after that, smashing the post from just outside the box. To be fair to Eintracht, they were in this game because they had nothing to play for. They got new manager Dennis Schmidt. He called for a performance, and they had their moments in the first half. And after the break, Spurs found that big breakthrough. A free kick worked back to Xavi Simons. His deep cross headed back across by Cuti Romero, and Kolo Muani, against his old club, flicked it home. That didn't go down well at Eintracht, nor his celebration is worth pointing out. It was a good game, I thought, in the first half. Spurs, good value for the lead with a decent showing. And Eintracht, to their credit, they kept pushing, but it left gaps in behind as well. And when Solanke came on, he took full advantage of that, racing in behind to take advantage of a misplaced defensive header, sliding home across the keeper to double the lead. Spurs finishing 4th. And the difference between their Premier League and Champions League campaigns is really quite night and day, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Also, look, it might be that their form turns out to be night and day with Dom Solanke available to them. I was always told that Thomas Frank could not wait.
He started at the weekend and they drew with Burnley, so...
Yeah, but he's only just coming into it. He's both Champions League games that he's played so far, scored against Dortmund in the 2-0 win. He's scored in this 2-0 win. His finish tonight was like a goal that Harry Kane would finish. It was a fantastic finish. And Thomas Frank has been waiting for this moment. It was a prolonged absence that Dom Solanke had. He's been crying out for this. I know that in the last few days, Tottenham have considered going and getting involved in trying to get Jean-Philippe Mateta. Ultimately, I think they've decided not to do that, but they've just needed a goal scorer. Kolo Muani has found it really difficult to fit into the team. Obviously, he scored here, but Juventus have been looking at, can they get him out of there? Because they know that he's not a good fit so far for what they've got. And the chances are Tottenham don't take up their option to sign him. So I think Frank now has somebody that he can have as a constant focal point. He's had to be a little bit careful with him so far, because there's absolutely no way you can risk having Solanke back on the sidelines again. But I think it will change what they're capable of. Ultimately, they deserve credit for the fact that they've gone through in the Champions League in the manner in which they have. I don't think they've had the toughest schedule of anybody in the Champions League so far, but nevertheless, it doesn't matter. They've failed against, poor teams in the Premier League. That hasn't seemed to matter. But in the Champions League, it's just been an area where they haven't really skipped a beat so far. They haven't missed a moment. And so it'll be a relief for them that they don't have any more games in terms of like the playoffs, so they don't have that stress. And now Frank's actually going to get a bit of breathing space. Like, he's not going to get sacked imminently. Yes, they might be starting to put the feelers out to what they would do next, but it's another win that means that he's staying in the job. And what if he beats Man City at the weekend? What would that change? Like, change a lot. And like, there'll be some Tottenham fans who are kind of torn on this because they don't believe that he's the long-term answer. But you've got to get behind your team. And ultimately, Postecoglou won a European trophy last season. Maybe Thomas Frank will go and do it in the Champions League.
He's going to one-up him. We said this last week, didn't we? He's going for one place lower in the Premier League, 18th, and one higher in the European competition by winning the Champions League. So we'll see. But a good result for Tottenham, and a good thing that they don't have to play in those knockout rounds. Let's go to Liverpool. They needed a good result as well, and they got one. They won 6-0 against Qarabag at Anfield. Relatively strong lineup for Liverpool, I thought. They went for Gravenberch at centre-back, and then they played more back in a kind of 4-2-3-1. Wits in the 10, Salah on the right, Hakpo on the left, Nakateke through the middle. The kind of one downside of tonight for Liverpool is that Frimpong went off really early with a hamstring injury, which is dreadful news for him and for Liverpool. But Ekitike really kind of ran this game. He had an early chance that curled narrowly wide, but they took the lead 15 minutes in. Bit of a scramble from a Szoboszlai corner, bounced to Alexis McAllister at the back post, and he forced it home, and it relaxed Anfield. And it seemed to relax that team as well. The second was a lovely bit of interplay between Ekitike and Wits. They combined, and nice finish for Wits, his first Champions League goal for Liverpool. It was a nice ball down the left from Andy Robertson to set Ekitike away down that side, which wasn't lost on me. Once he turned inside, it opened up really nicely. And to be honest, in the second half, Liverpool just put the pedal down. And I think for the first time in a while, Anfield just really, really enjoyed itself. Salah got the third, curled in a beauty after Szoboszlai sort of teed him up from a free kick. Ekitike scored a lovely fourth, twisted and turned the Qarabag defence, strode away from them and finished comfortably. Fifth was a bit chaotic. McAllister rounded the keeper after a bit of pinball and tucked it home. And Chiesa added a sixth as Liverpool sort of ran riot. Slid in by Van Dijk, of all people, who was just weirdly in the opposition box in open play, but it was what it was, I think, a 5-0 up. Liverpool finished in third, but shout out to Qarabag because this is a terrible result, but they've had a good campaign and they sneaked into the playoffs nonetheless. They've earned that in some of the other performances that we've seen from them. But just a night to really relax Anfield a little bit after some recent travails, which was nice in so many ways.
Yeah, relax Salah as well. Him and Szoboszlai seem to have this deal between them, don't they? One of them just going to roll their studs over it, and the other one's going to bend it into the corner. So that's a positive for Arne Slot if they can just do that more often.
Yeah, 100%. It's a good goal. And look, the wall doesn't really know what it's doing. It opens up really nicely, but it's still a great strike from Salah. And look, I don't think there's loads to kind of analyse from this Liverpool performance. I don't think it's going to carry into the weekend and they're going to have a similar result. But I just thought that after that first one went in, you just kind of felt the kind of sigh of relief around the place, and everyone be like, right, okay, we can get on the same page for 90 minutes at the very least. And they were faced with very little opposition. I didn't think this was not Qarabag's finest night. Barcelona are into the automatic spots as well. They finished fifth despite starting the day outside them. They won 4-1 against Copenhagen. It wasn't all plain sailing. It was Dani Olmo and Eric Garcia in the pivot in midfield with Firmine back in the number 10. Copenhagen needed to win to stay alive. They put in a pretty attacking lineup, I thought, sort of 4 forward players in a sort of 4-2-4. And it was an absolutely terrible start from Barcelona, carved open by a really simple pass through the middle. Joan Garcia came out for it and then retreated, caught in no man's land, and a nice moment for young Victor Davison, who scored at the Nou Camp, which is a cool moment for the youngster. And look, Barcelona, as you might expect, piled on the pressure. They felt vulnerable to a quick counter from Copenhagen throughout. And I think part of this is the lack of both Frankie de Jong, who was suspended, and Pedri, who's obviously injured in the middle. It gave them absolutely no control in the middle of the park, and it led to quite a lot of chaos. They couldn't find an equaliser in the first half, but it didn't take too long in the second to get things back to level. Unbelievable ball from Olmo to set in Yamal down the right, perfectly timed run. He drew the keeper and just squared for Lewandowski to smash it home. And look, once Barcelona find the groove, they tend to put their foot down. On the hour mark, they take the lead. A fair bit of luck associated with it. A Yamal strike from the edge of the box, looped off a defender and sort of fell into the goal. And it's funny because Lewandowski starts celebrating before the ball's in the net because he can see the trajectory of it because he's underneath it, which is quite amusing in some way. They got a third a couple of minutes later. Penalty decision felt really harsh to me. It looked like Lewandowski had kicked the defender as he was drawing his foot back to shoot. But referee gave it. Rafinha makes no mistake from the spot, fired past the keeper's correct guess to give Barcelona what felt like an unassailable lead. And Marcus Rashford got another goal as well off the bench with a free kick that sort of squirmed under the goalkeeper. There was a bit of drama late on. Copenhagen thought they'd got one back later on. More questionable goalkeeping from Joan Garcia. It ends up getting ruled out for this, but it's not often we've said that he's had a couple of weird ones. He flaps at it. And look, there's deemed to be contact and the ball gets ruled out. But it does feel a little bit weird because Joan Garcia has been one of the constants in a Barcelona season that's been very, very up and down. But ultimately, it didn't really matter in the end. Barcelona finished fifth. Copenhagen end up down and out. It wasn't the most convincing performance in the world, but you come out on the right side of a 4-1 win. And, ultimately, no one really, really matters when they're thinking about it. No one's going to be worrying about that when Barcelona are in the last 16. But they still feel very, very open. And especially with Pedri and De Jong out, it did feel like you could really get at this team. So they will be hoping that Pedri is back before they have to deal with that round of 16.
I mean, mate, the stats, the stats for this game were so funny. 76% possession, 28 shots on goal from Barcelona. So maybe 4 wasn't the full story. But only 5 big chances, to be fair, created out of all of them. But I've seen some pictures afterwards, and all the Barca lads seem to be in very good spirits. Rashford, Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski, they've all had an important night to kind of give themselves a little pep as well. So yeah, good night for them.
Yeah, a decent night for Barcelona after what was a very, very wobbly start. They end up automatically qualifying for the round of 16, as do Manchester City, just by the skin of their teeth. Now, they won 2-0 against Galatasaray. They did their part, and Pep, before the game, had come out and been like, it's not in our hands. We just got to win our game and hopefully that, the other results go our way. They did just about. I thought it was quite an interesting selection from Pep, Dean. He played Nico O'Reilly in centre defence midfield with Reinders and Rodri, both out of this one. He played Marmoush behind Haaland, Doku and Shirky in a front three behind the striker, and Ake came back in at centre-back because obviously they can't use Mark Gay until the next round. Sane faced his old club. Mario Lemina returned to the midfield for Galatasaray, but this was a story of whether Erling Haaland was going to be able to break his duck, and he missed an early chance. It was like, oh God, is it continuing? It didn't take too long to set that right, rediscovering that scoring touch. Sent clean through, lovely ball from Jeremy Doku to put it into his path. He lifts it over the keeper very comfortably, and you're thinking, okay, right, yeah, we were all wrong to worry in so many ways. And it kind of felt like a matter of when or not if City would score that second goal. It came from more excellent work from Doku, flashed down the left-hand side, wriggled past his defender and laid it on a plate for Shirky, the slot home. Sadly for City, and the kind of big blow from this game is that Doku then went off injured before half-time, which is a shame because he was having a cracking game. And Real Madrid's loss meant that City sneaked into the top 8 in 8th, which Pep will be delighted with. There wasn't loads to report in the second half, but City getting the job done in relatively comfortable style, it felt.
Yeah, it was interesting. Apparently Pep had never come up against a Turkish team before. That was interesting. You'd think he must have somewhere along the line, but apparently not. Haaland does himself a favour. I think that's 55 and 54 now in Champions League. That's pretty incredible. Obviously extremely important for him just to remind himself that he knows where the back of the net is and remind everyone else that he's not done yet. He'll be staying in my fantasy Premier League team, I can promise you. Shirky gets one as well. But big news, that Doku's gone off injured, because Doku was actually playing very well. And Haaland was very grateful for the assist that he'd got off of him. Foden comes on for him. And actually, Marmoush didn't have a good night. It wasn't one of his best performances. And eventually, Foden's the one that ends up playing closer to Haaland. So it'll be interesting to see what the shake-up is when City go into that really big game against Spurs at the weekend as to who is up there in the starting lineup. Because there are some selection headaches in here now for Pep. One thing is he's never phased about giving O'Reilly extreme responsibility. Like, he must absolutely love this lad, and he has no qualms about putting him into high pressure situations, because Galatasaray are a decent team, and you're also trying to block off the service to Osimhen. Like, that's an extremely important job in a team.
They're in the playoffs, right? So this result was never really going to harm them. It felt like they were, a point would have guaranteed it, but they were always kind of going to be okay, considering the amount of teams that would have needed to pull off something special. But again, this wasn't their best night, but they've had a pretty good Champions League campaign, and ultimately City have just really stifled them over the course of this game.
Yeah, no, they did what they had to do. A lot. You say they're kind of in recovery mode at the moment, Man City. They had to kind of fix their season to make sure that they've still got plenty to play for. Losing to Man United, losing to Bodo Glimt. And in both those competitions so far, they've come back. They've beaten Wolves 2-0 in the Premier League. They've won this game 2-0 against Galatasaray in the Champions League. So it's all in the past now. Like, let's move on. We move forwards, and now we've had the reboot we needed. Everybody's fixed, and now we put our foot on the pedal.
Yeah, grinding through the gears a little bit. I think it feels like for Man City in the last couple of games, and maybe that's the reset, as you say, that they needed. The top two were obviously already guaranteed of finishing in the top 8, so there was less to play for, but both of them won. Arsenal won 3-2 against Kairat Almaty, and Arteta rotated pretty much everyone, as you might expect, but not as many youngsters as I or many others had expected in this team. And look, there were some nice moments in this. Arsenal took a comfortable early lead, simple as you like. Havertz plays in Gyökeres. He fires home straight through the middle, and a nice finish from Gyökeres to finish it off. Very, very easy. And you did worry a little bit for Kairat at that moment, but they gave away a penalty, Arsenal, straight away. Jorginho made no mistake. It was very well taken. You were like, okay, maybe we do have a game on our hands. It didn't last particularly long, the parity. Kai Havertz with his first goal in over a year, which is a nice one. I thought it was a nice combination from Gyökeres and Havertz. Their physicality dovetailed quite nicely, opened up the space for Havertz to tuck it home. And, at that moment, you're thinking, okay, are they going to kick on in this one? Maybe there's an element of conserving energy, I think, about Arsenal and this squad, because they knew that there wasn't loads to play for in this game. But I thought it was interesting to see Havertz playing in a slightly more withdrawn role and seeing how that affected Gyökeres. I thought there were signs of life between the two of them, which might be something that Arteta can rely on later in the season. Gabi Jesus came off the bench in the second half, and look, he thought he'd added a fourth. It was ruled out for offside. Martinelli had got the third from a sort of weird scrappy thing that was originally ruled offside, but ended up in the back of the net and given by VAR. And it's a shame that Jesus' goal was ruled out, because it was a nice finish from him. It got a little bit sloppy right at the end. Ricardinho scored a great header in the 94th minute, but it was too little too late. 8 from 8 for Arsenal, who cruised through top of the league. They get the job done. It was nice to see Ife Ibrahim, I thought, for the last few minutes. Real serious talent from the academy. Tall, rangy centre defensive midfielder. A lot of people very, very excited about him. So nice to see him pick up a couple of minutes. But Arsenal, without too much fuss and perhaps more comfortably than the scoreline suggests, getting the job done against Kairat.
Yeah, I mean, when you've won every single game in the Champions League phase,
and you get the bottom team at home on your final day,
it's probably what you deserve. To be fair, you
can be excused for taking your foot off the pedal
a
little bit. I think from an Arsenal perspective, it was just important to win and make sure no one got injured, and ultimately that is what
they weren't booed off in this one, so that's good.
Yeah, let's just start. Bayern won as well. They won 2-1 against PSV in a strange game. They needed a point to guarantee second if Real Madrid had won. Obviously, that ended up not mattering whatsoever, but Bayern rotated pretty heavily. Nicholas Jackson started in front of Harry Kane. Lennart Karl started on the right for Elise. Jonas Erbig was given a go in front of Manuel Neuer. And Musiala returned wearing the number 10, which was very, very nice to see in the Champions League. PSV made a couple of weird changes. Drew Esch, who's been excellent in this competition, was benched. Perisic started and Kustil up top with Ricardo Pepi injured at the moment. Relatively quiet first half, but Bayern opened the game up at the start of the second. Back to front, really nice move. Lennart Karl doing really well. Exchange pass to Musiala. And it's good to see that none of the touches left him. A beautiful little shift inside, and he rifles one into the roof of the net. Outrageous gorgeous finish. It's great to see him back and in the groove, even if it wasn't kind of as smooth as that for the full 90 minutes. He's very much still got it, which is nice to see. Look, PSV don't really have any other way of playing apart from attacking. They kept that by and they got their reward. Really lovely goal. Ismail Saibari plays a clever 1-2 with Goose Till and screams one into the top corner. Lovely strike from him as well. Another goal of the night contender, although I think I have the winner later on. Very much in his locker. I love Saibari, and I'm surprised that there hasn't been more interest in him from clubs who have more reach and more money than PSV. So maybe that's something that will happen in the future. But Bayern had so much talent on the bench, and on came Harry Kane, and he made it 2-1 just moments afterwards. Really simple. Long ball from Erbig, Luis Diaz over the top, he squares, and Kane just side foots it home. Mauro Jr. was sent off late on for a second yellow as PSV kind of threw bodies forward. Bayern saw it home. They finished second, and PSV, despite two of the most impressive wins of this entire league stage against Liverpool and that hammering of Napoli, which you remember in Eindhoven earlier, are down and out. So goodbye PSV and thanks for the memories.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, it was important for Bayern because they did lose at the weekend. It doesn't happen very often. So they've bounced back if they needed to ever prove to themselves that they need to bounce back. So they've avoided the back-to-back defeats anyway. Yes, another solid win.
There you go. The league leaders in both the Premier League and the Bundesliga, top two in the Champions League, needing big wins to bounce back from defeats at the weekend. It was done. It was done. Right, there we have it. They were all the teams who have finished in those automatic spots. We're going to run through everything else that happened when we come back after the break. Make sure you stick with us here on Ranks FC.
Okay, Jack, this is where the stage really is yours, mate. You normally don't have this many, but there's still like 8 games we haven't run through. So you're going to have to take us on a journey here, mate. I've seen a few of the goals, but I'll admit on a night like this, I don't really know. You go.
I mean, look, even me, in-depth analysis is beyond me on 18 games at once.
Yeah, you don't need in-depth on these ones, I don't think.
There's not loads, but I'll run you through what happened in most of them.
I just want to know, go on. The best goal. Was it the Paphos game? Was that the one I'm waiting for?
Yes, that is the goal you're waiting for, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Right, let's start in Madrid. Atleti 1, Bodo Glimt 2. And it was interesting this because Simeone stuck with Alvarez despite his goal drought. Nico and Baena started wide and Hansko came back in at left back, which I thought was interesting. Glimt stuck with exactly what worked against Manchester City last week in news that will shock absolutely nobody. And Alexander Sorloth is on an absolute hot hand at the start of 2026. He continued that with a brilliant, really strong header from a Hansko delivery from that left-hand side. And at that point, you were like, right, Atleti with a real chance of qualifying for these automatic spots are in the driving seat. But Glimt really fought their way back into it. They got an equaliser. They worked the ball out wide on the left and crossed, and it found Frederick Sjovold, the fullback, ever present in this year's Champions League, scoring his first Champions League goal, which is a nice story in itself, but like crashing into the box to fire home the equaliser. No idea where he came from, not a usual goal scorer. And in the second half, they went and took the lead in the hour mark. And Dean, we've talked about the best goals. I guarantee you this is the worst goal of the night. It is absolute and utter chaos, right? The scrappiest goal you are ever likely to see. Complete pinball in the box. And Kasper Her, who was the hero of that game last week against Manchester City, forced the ball home from about 2 yards out. I can't tell you how many players it hit in the 10 seconds before this goal is forced into the back of the net. But it was pure and utter chaos. Really, really ugly. That won't matter a jot to Bodo Glimt. They pulled through into the playoffs with 2 huge wins in 2 weeks.
Massive.
City and now Atleti.
That's incredible.
Beat Pep Guardiola, Manchester City side at home. And then they go away and they beat Atletico Madrid. Their first 2 wins in the Champions League. Yeah. And they go and do it at the Metropolitano.
That's wild. That is wild.
Considering they haven't played a game since December before these 2 games, and they haven't played anything
pre-season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gargantuan feat to turn that around. Look, Atleti end up 14th. They're having a very, very strange time of it of late. And there's a real sense that their season's in danger of petering out. But don't take anything away from Bodo Glimt. They were brilliant last week against City. They fought their way back in really bravely in a game that could have got away with them. And they forced themselves into the playoffs. And as we say, no one's going to want to go to the Arctic Circle in that first leg and have to come up against this team who have such a sense of self-belief. Kjetil Knutsen has done a brilliant, brilliant job for so many years with this team. But it's nice to see him getting their spotlight on the biggest nights.
No one wants them at home either now, so there's that.
Yeah. If you can go to the Metropolitano and win, where can't you go and win?
Yeah.
So we will find out. But brilliant, great stuff from Bodo Glimt. Not great stuff from Marseille, who are out of the competition after losing 3-0 to Club Brugge. Brugge needed a win to stay alive, and Marseille needed a point to guarantee the playoffs. And there was a couple of changes. Obviously, we saw Ethan Nwaneri go to Marseille on loan. He dropped out because he's not registered. So did Quentin Timber, who joined, which I think is a really, really smart signing from them. Kondogbia came in, Greenwood came in, and Igor Paixão was on the bench. But Brugge scored these 2 goals in the space of about 5 minutes in the first half that shell-shocked Marseille. Poor goalkeeping for the opener, but it's Diacon, who I sang the praises of last week, who forced the ball in from distance. It does take a huge deflection. And then young Romeo Vermont with the second, as Marseille just self-destructed from a defensive perspective. And from that moment, Brugge really controlled this nicely. They added a third in the second half when Stankovic got his second in 2 games, and that pushed them up to finish in 19th and ultimately ended Marseille's Champions League adventure after such a good start as well. They had a real fall off, and they ended up being completely stung from an insipid showing in Belgium. So no real sympathy, I'm afraid, for Marseille. That is really poor. It was in their own hands, and they completely and utterly bottled it.
You see, Brugge had even put a sign up on their big electronic scoreboard that says, "Congratulations, Marseille, on qualification."
Yep.
And then the Benfica goal
Then
happened.
the Benfica goal went in. They had to take it down. And that is a lesson to everybody. Never count your chickens before they are hatched. Good night for the Belgian sides. Let's go across to USG. They beat Atalanta 1-0. And look, they were pretty cooked no matter what. But an Atalanta win could have meant the automatics. Promise David was suspended, so Flores started up top, and Kaleli was given his chance on that left-hand side of the 5. That turned out to be a big one. Look, Yunus Musa started in midfield for all us USMNT fans out there. And there were some strange changes. Shalda Ketelara was dropped for Samardzic in the 10 alongside Gluckman, and Kristovic started instead of Skamaka. Big goal for USG at the start of the second half. Deep free kick fell to Kaleli, who took his chance, thundered one home at the back stick. They'd never won at home in the Champions League before, so the place absolutely went mad when this hit the back of the net, and they hung on. Perhaps Atalanta realised that their chances of making the top 8 were pretty much nothing, despite whatever happened in this one, but a big result for USG, despite coming up short for the playoffs. The first Champions League home win is something to shout about. So a good night for the Belgian sides as well. Mm-hmm. Less good for some of the Dutch sides. Obviously, we've spoke about PSV being eliminated. Ajax were as well. Look, they had the world's slimmest chance. Even with a win in this one, it would have probably made no difference. But they lost 2-1 to Olympiacos at home. Brilliant goal from Olympiacos at the start of the second half to score the opener here. Gorgeous link up between Taremi and Gelson Martins. Nice flick through from the Iranian, set up the Portuguese to squeeze it into the far corner. Really nice stuff. Ajax have found a bit of belief in recent weeks. They won themselves a penalty, and Kasper Dolberg stepped up to thump it home and give them a lifeline. But Olympiacos knew that a win would guarantee playoff spot. They wanted that security, and they found the gears to go ahead again, this time from a corner. Smart delivery, I thought, flicked in nicely by Santiago Hezler, who's a player I love, and again, who had an excellent game in the heart of midfield. Olympiacos climbing up to 18th, but another body blow to another frustrating season for Ajax, who are back very much in rebuild mode again. There was a game in the middle of the pack in the playoff rounds between Borussia Dortmund and Inter. Look, Inter potentially could have sneaked into the top 8 with a win, but it felt unlikely, and Dortmund would kind of probably fine whatever happened. Turns out there was 2-0 to Inter. A couple of decisions. We saw Filippo Mane get a start at centre-back, with Anselmino being recalled by Chelsea last week. And Dortmund played Fabio Silva and Maxi Bayer behind Girassi up top. So a relatively attacking lineup. And not loads happened in the first half. It felt a bit dead rubbery until a moment of real quality did eventually make the breakthrough. Inter had created some chances, but just really not taken them. And it was Fede DiMarco, shock horror. He came on in that game against Pisa at the weekend when them 2-0 down and completely turned the game in their favour. And here he scored the opener. Caught a beauty of a free kick into the top corner. Again, the difference maker. And look, maybe later on Inter smelt a bit of blood from the Real Madrid game. They added a second, but it wasn't quite enough. Andy Diouf, who hasn't had all that many minutes so far in Inter shirt, twisting and turning in the Dortmund box. His shot kind of rolled in via a deflection to put a bit of gloss on it. Inter finish up in 10th. Dortmund in 17th, but it was one of those games that didn't feel like there was loads riding on it. Let's go to Paphos, shall we? Let's talk about that goal. They won 4-1 against Slavia Prague. What a goal from Paphos to give them the lead. Vlad Dragomir, with a 35-yard scorcher on the angle after a corner was cleared, a rocket. And for me, this was goal of the night. It was just a really good strike. And it's pure as, when you see the camera from behind the goal, just one of those strikes that you look at and think, wow, that's one to put in a frame and show the grandkids. Incredible goal.
Screamer. Yeah, proper screamer.
Really good. Paphos were pegged back, which dampened the atmosphere a bit, and it was a bit scruffy from Slavia, cross from the right-hand side. Keeper and defender collided, and Shalopek slid in to equalise. But Paphos didn't sulk. They retook the lead after halftime. Great finish from Felipe, tucking home on the spin. And then once Slavia were reduced to 10 men after a red card, Paphos scored 2 quick-fire goals to put themselves back with a shot of the playoffs. They pushed up the goal difference. They ultimately came up a little bit short, but they've given a really good account of themselves in the Champions League, I think, Paphos on the whole, and have been a credit to the competition. So I wanted to give them a little bit of love. They might well have scored the goal of the league stage with that final moment. So shouts out to Dragomir, shouts out to Paphos, because they've been a lot of fun. And actually, I think that they've really kind of come into the competition and shown what they were capable of, even if they do end up a little bit short of those playoffs. No one gave them, a snowball's chance in hell. And to kind of end up off it just by goal difference, really quite impressive, I think, in terms of what they put together. Let's go to a less impressive team, Villarreal. Their dreadful, ultimately shambolic Champions League campaign came to a close with a 3-0 loss to Bayer Leverkusen. A strong side from Leverkusen. They needed a point to secure qualification. Tillman and Matza behind Schick. Eki Fernandez with Alex Garcia in the midfield, which I liked. Villarreal made a few changes, notably in goal, where Geronimo Rui, after a bad turn last time out, was dropped for Arnau Tenas. That went even worse. Look, what in the name of all that is holy were Villarreal doing here for the Leverkusen opener? Incredibly lax from Renato Vega, who just rolled it back to Tenas with no pace on it. He was closed down by Tillman, and he just kicks it into Tillman, and it bounces into the back of the net. It was completely and utterly slapstick watching Villarreal defend, which was a major shame in many ways. They've been so good domestically over the course of this campaign in Spain. And in the Champions League, they've just not been able to summon any of that whatsoever. There was another moment where a strike came back off the post, hit Tenas on the back, bounced up onto the crossbar, bounced back down again, and he grabbed it just before it was bundled into the net. But more of the same for Leverkusen's second, haphazard defending. Matza retains possession with the keeper converging on him, defenders not closing him down. He lays it back, it's crossed the middle, Schick heads it down, and Tillman slams home a cracking half volley, to be fair, for the actual finish into the bottom corner. But it was so chaotic and so weird to watch, Dean. Villarreal were playing like they were a pub team. It was I can't really describe how poor they were in this first half. And to be honest, it was a surprise that this was only 3-0 in the end. Grimaldo added a third, trademark run into the box from the left, slammed the ball home, and Leverkusen sneak in the seeds for the playoff round ahead of Borussia Dortmund, which they'll be pleased with, which means they get the second leg at home. But Villarreal have been an absolute shambles. They have been diabolical in this tournament. It has been, in many ways, embarrassing watching them play football in this competition. And I have, there's a side that I have a real soft spot for. I love Marcelino as a manager, but I have no idea. It's been embarrassing watching them play.
Wow. You don't normally go that scathing, mate.
No, I've been really disappointed with them. It's just not been good enough by any standard, by any measuring stick. They have been god awful all the way through. Anyway, enough about Villarreal. We will have to talk about them.
Never mentioned again this season.
No, not this. Not on Champions League takeaway. Anyway, finally, the last game was Monaco 0, Juventus 0. When I posted about what games I thought that might be worth watching at the start of the night, I got a response on Twitter. Someone was like, maybe you should watch Spalletti's Juventus because it's been really good entertainment. And I was like, look, there's nothing really riding on this game. Otherwise, I probably would have tuned in. I'm really glad I didn't. Really glad I didn't. Monaco 0, Juventus 0. A point apiece keeps Monaco in the playoffs and Juventus in the seeds. A real dead rubber. Nothing really happened.
Yeah, if you didn't watch it, then that tells you everything. I
think that this was just a game where everyone was like, a point's probably fine for both teams. And ultimately, that's what happened. They played out a very, very boring game of football. So they have it. That was the final. Yeah. So that's all 18 games.
Yeah, well done, mate. You can take a deep breath. We are now into a knockout phase of playoff games. They are over 2 legs. The first 2 legs will be The first leg, will be 17th, 18th of Feb. And then the second leg, the deciders will be on 24th and 25th of Feb. So they'll be a bit more evenly spread out. That'll be a bit easier for you to watch. The draw is coming up on Friday. It'll take place in Switzerland. So by the weekend, we'll know exactly all of the matchups that we've got to come at the end of next month.
Yeah, praying for a Benfica Real Madrid rematch. Like just could be a whole lot of fun. Well, bear in mind, do you remember we got this with Barcelona and Benfica last year?
Oh, we did.
We got like the chaos of that. So perhaps we're going to get another Benfica versus Spanish opposition chaos in this round. So that's what I'm hoping for. But let us know in the comments what games you're looking forward to or hoping to see in these playoff rounds. And all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, but we hope you've enjoyed our walkthrough and throughout the entirety of this league stage. It's been great working it through with all of you Rank Squad. We're looking forward to those playoff rounds and to continuing this through the knockout stages of the competition. But for now, from us, thank you so much, and we'll see you all very, very shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace.